Hey guys, this is DFD, aka Dark Frozen Depths, back with another Kamihime project video. Now, what you're seeing on screen is an image of basically every single character that's in those miracle tickets that we get that have the first 3 years worth of characters to pick from. So generally, like this is a pretty good list, but there are a few things that honestly I would change about it. But again, that's still my opinion. But this is still a pretty good list to follow, and this is brought up because of the fact that you get 10 of those miracle tickets in order to use for basically anybody on this list. So you kind of need to have a general idea of what to go for because you're not going to get those back. And if you want more miracle tickets like that, they're going to include year 4, but still have a lot of these guys in here, and some of this stuff may still be worth picking. So that said, that's what this video is for, and it's not exactly a guide, but more of a reference for people to use. But a big thing though too is the fact that for a general rule, you want to, if you're going for weapons, you want to pick ones that are going to be better than the free ones you can get, or you want to pick a weapon that you know will last you a very, very, very long time. Like even if they add more stuff to the game. So that said, for safety, you probably want to pick something like the large stinger weapons, or large vigor is still good too, to be quite honest, but you don't necessarily have to go for it. Now, this list is also marked with a whole bunch of different stuff, so let's go over what that pretty much is. If there's anything with a red box, that means it's a very, very powerful weapon, and I have no disagreement with that. But I do have a slight disagreement with some of the orange weapons, because some of them were actually decent. But, for starters, there's definitely, that Bear of Gun should probably be orange, too. It's actually pretty good if you have the, Dark Burst characters. But, then on top of that, too, there's also a few weapons where if you happen to get them, you may want to hold on to them, like, say, their Rebus sword, because it is slightly better than what you get from grinding. You just don't want to, like, spam that weapon. Like, if you want a Rebus, then keep that weapon, but don't get multiple copies of a Rebus. That really should be, like, there should at least be another color for weapons, too, because, it's, I wouldn't mark it as orange, but it is just below it. But, orange is basically good weapons that actually go for. Red is probably the ones that you're going to aim for. So, that said, like, I've even got me some, I can't pronounce her name, but it's a Gallirept. But I've got me some of that scythe. It's about 5 of them I grabbed because I wanted to get 2 of them to, max limit break. They're now both final limit break, and I'm about to get them to the second final break. So, there's that. But, with the characters, this is where my opinions differ quite a bit, because for starters, the characters that are labeled yellow are the ones that you absolutely should aim for. I don't know why Daki's not a yellow one, because she's stupidly strong for fire. You have to awaken her, sure, but she's stupidly strong for fire. Like, Daki is a must-have for fire. So, if you're going for fire, you definitely want to get her. And then on top of that, too, I would also argue that, considering how the healing and all that is in this game and everything too, some of the healers might actually need to be like a different color too. Like some of them aren't marked as well as they should be. Like Soul, I agree, should be like light green. But there's also Nike and Aphrodite on here who might actually be pretty decent. So they should be at least a dark green. So that's another thing as well. So again, it's like varying good opinions too. Like Shiva's also a pretty good one to have as well for water. I don't know why she's not a dark green, but she'd have to be awakened as well. But again, quite a good amount of characters that's actually like labeled here. So yellow is the ones that are must have. Light green are the ones that are powerful. I can agree with all of that too. And then dark green are the characters that are still pretty strong, just not as powerful as the rest that were marked. But again, there's some that I probably would change. And then there's also these on here that have the eyes right next to them. you have to awaken them in order to get them as marked. As a matter of fact, I would also change too that Ariane Rod would also need to be like yellow if she's awakened. Like she's a must-have if you awaken her. Like she's stupidly strong for wind. But going over the list, I can actually like mention the characters too because I know quite a bit about them. For Brutus, I can agree with. Erebus should probably be dark green as well because she's actually a vigor buffer for dark, and she also can do some good coverage for anybody struggling with the Haggith raid. So single target cover basically. Like she'll draw the attacks to her. She's actually not bad for that type of stuff. Frey, she's decent, but she definitely wouldn't be colored. So honestly, I believe there should be a 4th tier colors for the Hime as well. Because keep in mind, I did not make this list. This is actually a list that was pulled from somebody on official, but it's a good list, but I can't fully agree with everything. Frigg, I don't know why there's no eyes right next to her, but the only way she really should be that white green is if you awaken her. When you awaken her, she's that strong. If you don't awaken her, she should be a dark green. But Nuwa is also a pretty good one too if you know what you're doing, but that's why she shouldn't be colored. Iris is voted a little bit too high if you ask me. She's only got that 1 debuff for white. And she actually has some good BG fill and decent ability nuking, but the main reason anybody even uses her is that debuff. But when it comes to Lug, I can agree with that ranking. Mammon, I think, probably should be like not a dark green, but like a tier below it. So she's also another one to kind of watch out for because when used properly, she actually does help the team out quite a bit for fire. But if you know what you're doing, Minerva could also be kind of decent as well. So again, not marked, but still could be there. Same for Lakashimi as well. If you need a single target cover for white, then my personal opinion, the white version of Athena should be a good pick for that one because she will draw attacks to her better, and then she's got an ability to withstand that 1 HP. Plus her damage cut is pretty frequent. It's like every 3 turns. So, my opinion, she should be a dark green as well. Can fully agree with Dion. She's nuts when you get her burst going. Amon should be higher. That fire version of Amon should definitely be higher. She should be a light green. She's pretty strong. Also, another noteworthy one to mention is Kali, because if you happen to go for like a soul called Alexander later on, she's going to be very good for that one. So I wouldn't necessarily say go after Kali, but if you happen to get her, just remember that she's very good for sacrificing for Alexander. Because Alexander needs two characters to die in order to be at full power. Well, not full power, but powerful enough. Because you don't want more than 2 characters dead. But, Wahoo, she's pretty good. I can agree with that. Tish is also pretty good. I can agree with that. Isis is a vigor buffer for wind, so keep that in mind. Like, she shouldn't be colored, but she's a vigor buffer for wind, so keep that, like, somewhere in your mind. Aether, I honestly would say that she's dark green if you have Exceed. And that's because she's supposed to keep stacking it and then also have some more buffs. If you don't have Exceed, then you can get the most out of her, and I'd say she's definitely a light green. Barif, she's the same case as Erebus. She can do like a cover, basically. So, but she's weaker than Erebus, but her weapon's better, if you ask me. Because you don't necessarily need Erebus' weapon, but Barif Gun is going to be pretty good for you. So, those said, like I said, they'd probably be like a 4th tier of colors. Like they have like light green and then dark green. I'd say like maybe a blue color or something like that. I don't know. Prometheus is actually good for towers, so keep that in mind as well, because I've had some serious delay in wind tower with using her. Like, it took forever for enemies to actually get their full orbed attacks off with her, and a few others. Belle is also a little bit underrated for this list as well, because I would say she's a dark green. She's actually pretty good when you use her, and she's one of one of the debuffers for Thunder that can actually use elemental debuffs. Like I said, Arya and Rod, I don't know why she's not yellow. If you awaken her and use her properly, she is at a yellow. Trust me, she is very, very strong. Chernobog I can agree with. I've been using her in a lot of different raids too, especially if you have the Paracelsus master point ability, which is 100 MP. If you happen to get that, Chernobog is going to do quite a lot more. So that's an easy way to rack up a lot of damage. Artemis, I would also say, is kind of a dark green because she's a little bit underrated. She can buff herself and somebody else, and it gives a pretty decent stinger buff along with ability damage. And then she's also a debuffer for light. So honestly, I would say she's a dark green. She's a little bit underrated. Like, I've used her quite a bit. Raw, no, because unless you're doing the jewel hunt, I can't see anybody using Raw. That's the only other time. Frey is very, very powerful. She should be a light green instead of a dark green. But you gotta awaken her for that one because she can lay on a lot of damage for your team and also BG fill and all that. You need to know what you're doing with her, but she should be a light green. Same case for Mammon, only like she's much easier to rack up some damage on. You need to get the snatch stacks going with her, and if you have Caspar on Thunder and have Caspar's 100 MP ability, then you're going to get those snatch stacks off pretty easily. So Mammon, I would say, is a light green, honestly. And even Beelzebub, who's right below her, the fire version of Beelzebub, I would say that she's actually a dark green because she gets some pretty powerful buffs when used right. The only thing that holds her back is that long turn of Rampage, but if you're using, again, the Paracelsus master ability, you're going to get a lot more out of Beelzebub. So if you know what you're doing, she's definitely a dark green. Pluto I can agree with. Atom I should say is a dark green as well, because she's got some very powerful single target effects, including an auto revive and a very sizable heal that also gives vigor buff. If she's bursting, then that's double effect. And she's one of the few ways to give 100% vigor buff to a character. So if you give it to your strongest light nuker, there you go. And then Athena, decent Hime. Gotta note that you may want to hold on to her weapon if you really, really need the HP, because it's a weapon that gives the most HP in the game compared to any other weapon, because it has like 2 stacks of defender on it. Ashraya, I can fully agree with. Thanatos, I'm not exactly sure. She's very powerful to where, honestly, I could say she could be light green or yellow. She's a very, very strong character when you awaken her, especially, again, with the Paracelsus master ability, because you're getting all that damage plus on normal attacks, and she's also upping your normal attack damage as well. So those two synergize well together. I can fully agree with Shamash. Don't worry about her. She's like outclassed especially if you get Kingu or Athena for light, because if you have one of those, you don't need Shamash. I don't even know why they gave her an awakening that week, but don't worry about Shamash. Cybele, just want to make it noteworthy that not only is she always going to combo attack, meaning you should never put a Tiara set on her, she also has a decent debuff too. So and she can self-heal herself to keep herself alive. So if you happen to use her, then just know that that's a little bit of a few noteworthy stuff. She shouldn't be coward, but I should mention that one. And then Vishnu, I gotta point out that she's actually kind of fallen off unless you really, really need a burst speed fill. So her weapon is not that good anymore. I know I've shown her weapon used on my weapon grid for a lot of different stuff, but now that they have the large vigor weapons that you can grind out, I'm going to start getting rid of the Vishnu stuff. So that said, don't be deceived on some of my vids or all that. Vishnu's weapon's falling off. She herself is kind of falling off, so don't worry about her. Mars, definitely a very good pick if you get her. I forgot who that is below her. But that, I can kind of agree with that one too. I think that was Marduk. I think that might have been Marduk. I don't know. But she's a pretty good pick as well, if you ask me. Then Nephthys. If you can get her to frequently burst, then she's insane because of how much cooldown removal she has on her abilities when she bursts. So if you know how to set up your teams, Nephthys can be a very powerful character. And then on top of that too, her weapon has small stinger. Now you're going to get a Gallia rep for the large stinger for sure. But if you happen to pull multiple copies of her, like don't trade for multiple copies. But if you happen to pull multiple copies, then you may or may not want to hold on to her hammer. It all depends. Like, if you feel like gambling with a little bit more stinger, then there you go, because you can still get some assault and HP to go with it. And it actually is pretty nice on my grid, but I may be getting rid of it once I get some better stuff. Now, Eros, she's the next one. Very, very good for light, especially some of the later raids in the game, too, including some of the Phantom raids as well. You want to awaken her if you get her, because of the simple fact that she supplies quite a bit of burst gauge fill if you keep getting debuffed and keep bursting with her. Then she can also give a little bit of barrier too, which sometimes helps. But she's a very good one to sit up and use, especially for like the Dark Malicious raid and a few others. Saraswati, I kind of want to say is underrated a little bit. She should be like a tier below the Dark Green, because if you know what you're doing with her, she can actually be pretty useful. She is like she's like Artemis, like the light version of Artemis, where she can basically buff herself and somebody else. She can heal herself and somebody else. Used right, she's actually pretty good. And again, Daki, I mentioned why she should be yellow. Like I mentioned she should be yellow, but I never really mentioned why. Spikes normal attack damage. Gives a super strong elemental resistance towards both wind and phantom, meaning she's very good for the phantom raids. And she also gives the team a very good drain effect when they normal attack. She should be yellow. If you're using fire, you get her. I'm not kidding. Now, Set, I also believe should be a dark green, because she's actually a pretty decent healer for wind as well. But if you have Frigg, you may not need Set, so there's that as well. Like, if you can awaken Frigg, you may not need Set, but Set is a decent backup on top of Frigg. Or you can use both, because both work pretty well in the, some of the later Thunder raids. So they'll keep you alive pretty nicely. But I would say that Set's like a dark green, and if you awaken Frigg, she's like a yellow for wind. But Tsukiyomi, if you don't want to rely on that debuff from Iris, and Tsukiyomi can actually be a replacement for that because it's more accurate, it's just half the effect. Just keep that in mind. But other than that, Tsukiyomi is kind of so-so. So I wouldn't really label her as any of the tiers, but that's something to know. They both carry an elemental resistance debuff, but Iris is more likely to miss, and that's another reason why she shouldn't be rated as high as she is. But Hastor should also be a dark green. She's a pretty good character for wind, but that's only if she's awakened. I would also say that the water version of Raphael is also a dark green, because she has some orb control. She gives you a damage cut. She also comes with some good debuffing. She's a pretty serviceable character for fire raids, so keep that in mind. The next one I would mention is Jupiter. When you awaken Jupiter, she probably should be mentioned as a dark green, because she's actually a pretty good character at that point. So that's something to know. She gives some good team buff and some decent team synergy. When raging enemies are going, then you need to pay attention to when you use some of her stuff, because then it'll really start dishing out some damage. Now, this next one, Osiris. Honestly, if you got Nephthys or Nefertim, that's her name. If you got Nefertim, then you may or may not need Osiris. Both are still good. Yeah, that's confusing too. Nephthys, Nefertum, yeah. But Osiris is still a pretty good one to pick as well if you need a dark healer. Now, EA, I have to mention, she's in a weird spot because I wouldn't mark her as any of the killers, but if she happens to be awakened, then she actually could be decent in the right hands. You really need to know what you're doing with her. But I wouldn't say to pick her. It's just something to know if you happen to pull her and are curious about using her. Azazel, definitely agree. If you can keep your HP up off of the little like overheat thing she does with her one buff, she can be very, very powerful for your team. So absolutely get her for wind. Absolutely get her for wind. Her and Frigg together makes things so much easier. Also, I noticed that Gaia is not even here as well with a killer, but Gaia works pretty well with them too. So there's that. But Cthulhu for water, full agree, but you definitely need to awaken her. She's very good for tower as well. Yamaraja is the same case too for fire, like decent for like different stuff and all that too, especially for the Bether raids. Like Bether and Bether Plus, you're getting debuff a lot. She can give you a little bit of protection towards that. Metatron, I need to mention that she's not someone you probably should pick from this, but if you are curious about using her, she can actually burst 3 times in a row when done right, and she also can do a pretty sizable burst too on the third one. But she's pretty niche, so keep that in mind. Like, she might be good for a couple of Tower 4s, though, if you know how to use her. But she'd have to be awakened for all that. So she's another last choice awakening like EA, if you're really that curious about it. Now, next one, Ryuo. When you awaken her, she actually is pretty good. Her debuffs are pretty strong. She can also extend the enemy's orb count if they were actually capable of that. Some enemies are immune. So, that said, Ryuo Awakening is actually pretty good. I wish I could say that Hades and Odin are good, but unfortunately they're not that good, even with Awakening for that. So, that said, don't worry about those two. But if you do happen to have them and are curious, Hades can help you in a few fights. Odin, she's only like maybe a couple of Tower 4s, if anything. And like I said, the SSR version of Water Nike, like, she definitely should have been a dark green because she heals, she also buffs, she also debuffs. She's pretty serviceable for that too. Sevarog, something to know, she might actually be pretty good in the Jewel Hunt event when she's awakened. Even without awakening, she probably still would be good for that, so keep that in mind. Kujalane as well, because Kujalane frequently fills her burst gauge up, so there you go. When you awaken Kujalane, she bursts so frequently it makes no sense. Now, I noticed that Aphrodite was here in the dark green, but Nike wasn't for some reason. But here's the thing, though. Nike is basically Aphrodite without the cleanse, and also with some different buffing. So, it all depends on what you want. And Aphrodite needs eyes, Nike doesn't. Now, Raiko, very, very good character for Thunder. I would argue that she would be somewhere between the light green and the yellow. I really would. Like, when you awaken her, she makes Thunder very, very strong, very, very tanky. Combined with Dion, those two make your team nearly unkillable when done right. So definitely get Raiko if you're getting Dion, and definitely awaken Raiko. Raphael's the light version. Honestly, I have to point this out because not too many people seem to have caught on to this, but she actually has some pretty niche setups where she can help you out in a few raids. But when you get to like the Guardian Plus raid, she falls out quite a bit. So she's decent for some early game stuff, and then even a couple of tower things too if you want some stall. But you would still have to awaken her for all of that, so don't feel obligated to do so, but keep in mind that if you don't mind sparing some eyes, she actually can help out for a few things. She's mainly about the delay, but a lot of the later raids will have like resistance towards like half of what she does, so something to point out. But Poseidon, very good when awakened. Definitely fully agree with that one. Now, I have to mention the Kala for one reason alone. If you don't mind sparing the eyes to awaken her, she can actually give Fire some more damage potential in one turn, because she has something called a distortion. But you would still need Hector to really make full use out of it, because I do believe Hector's got a better buff for a multiplier frame that we nicknamed Punish Frame. But and the Punish Frame is shared with Technical too, so that's what that basically is. Like, the normal attack ups and all that still goes in the Punish Frame as well, but for some reason burst and ability damage don't. But anyways, Akala is kind of good for some of that type of stuff, but again, that's if you happen to pull her and if you don't mind sparing the eyes, but she's not priority, just like a few others I mentioned. Now, Thor, I have to also mention that she's got a very powerful paralyzed debuff, and that's the main reason why a lot of people use her in the past. If there's a raid that's not resistant towards that, or an enemy that's not resistant towards that, like say some thunder, like some tower enemies that you may need for like thunder characters, then Thor might actually help out with that one. But again, she would need awakening to like double that paralysis. Is like 30 seconds compared to 15 if you do that. So again, that's another case of not priority. Don't have to awaken if you don't want to, but there you go. Susanoo O is another case too, where some pretty decent ability damage, and if she bursts, she gets more frequent cooldowns and all that too. But she would need awakening for that as well. And that's kind of the problem with quite a few of these Hime. A lot of them would still need awakening to actually be somewhat decent, but they still wouldn't be like, quote-unquote, a killer unit. They'd still be like a niche unit. So that said, Susanoo O is kind of that case as well. I don't need to say anything about Michael, because a lot of people that know about White know about Michael. Awaken her, use her. Period. And if you happen to have Belobog, she goes very well with Belobog. You should not be having bursts more than like 3 turns apart between the two, if I'm correct. Now, this next one, TYR, I never know how to pronounce her name. This next one is kind of weird, because she can be somewhat decent, but she has to be awakened. Again, another niche unit. Don't worry about it too much. Shiva, I would honestly say, is a dark green, but you have to awaken her. So there's that. But she can get some pretty powerful buffs for water. And when you have her and Ashraya together, you can kind of like alternate their buffs in order to get a lot of bonus damage. So that's something to know. I would say she's in the same position as Ashraya. I don't know why she's not here. Ares, somewhat decent damage nuker when she's awakened, but again, not priority. She shouldn't be a killer unit either. Amon, another case of shouldn't be a killer unit, because she's kind of like clashing with somebody else on this list when it comes to debuffing, but she actually isn't too bad. Satan is another case of not priority, but kind of a decent niche unit. Soul, honestly, the fan base for Soul kind of made her feel so overrated, but she is good to use as a character. Like, she's a very powerful healer with a good coverage on her kit, where she not only increases the team's healing for a few turns while debuffing, but can also remove enemy buffs. So Soul is actually kind of worth. And then on top of that too, when you burst, you get some dark resistance as well. So if Michael's dark resistance isn't up, Soul can do it too. So there's that. And then Gaia, I would at least put her as dark green. She is very, very strong out the gate when it comes to protecting your wing characters. And then when you awaken her, it goes even further. I will say this, and I'm completely honest. If you have Frigg awakened, Gaia awakened, and Azazel awakened, I should not see you die in Thunder Malicious unless you don't play that well at the game. I'm sorry, I have to say that. Those three together make you so absurdly tanky. So that said, you should not die a Thunder Malicious if you have those 3. So again, Gaia, I don't know why she's not rated higher. I don't agree with that one. But and then it gets even further with if you have Set as well, because 2 healers, a strong tank, and then Azazel's not necessarily a tank, but her buffs can work like that. So if you have all 4 of them, it's like your Thunder Militia should be much, much, much easier. So there's that. But anyways, one last thing I need to point out too. If you're watching this at the time of the roulette, I would suggest not even getting any of these, except for maybe some weapons, until that ends. Because of the simple fact that you may pull them from the roulette. In fact, I meant to get this video out earlier, but I've been kind of busy a little bit. But if there's any free pools going on, like it doesn't even matter about roulette, get these tickets after that. So that said, like time when you use these, you get 2 weeks to use these once you accept them. But if you don't accept them, there's no time limit. So that said, you have 2 weeks to use any miracle tickets that you accepted from the beginner missions. And just a reminder, you do need, I do believe, rank 100 and 50,000 power for one team. Like that little combat rating thing you got up there with the numbers and all that, that needs to be 50,000. You need to do both of those in order to have all the beginner missions completed. You may not need to complete them all for these miracle tickets, but complete the whole list of beginner missions. It is very good for all the stuff they give you. But anyways, that's all for this. This video is more or less to try and like talk about characters that may be underrated or you may not understand them. But there's quite a few that's also niche as well. And then there's a few that I didn't mention, like Samuel, and then I didn't mention Samuel, and then there's also like some that may have some weird niches, like Ymir. Like there's a few I didn't mention that honestly you might find a use for, but at the same time you never know. But I gave my suggestions on a lot of the ones that should be here, and there's a few that honestly wasn't even marked on this list. I don't even know how they were missed. But anyways, that's all for this. And more videos will come soon because Anniversary's got a lot of stuff they just added and everything too. I still gotta upload a few more videos. But anyways, that's all for this. More will come soon, and take care.